And literally that when we sense these emotions, that there's actual fluid changing in our body and energy changing in our body. Whenever you have a feeling, there's something happening there. There is something happening in your body, even though there may not be like a medical word for it. There's something functionally happening. I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. What does engaging the heart have to do with surrendering on the journey? Today, we're going to discuss this, and we're going to discuss the literal heart, and we'll discuss the energetic heart because they're actually a little different than each other. And I just want to welcome you for being here. We're going to end up starting in meditation today, and then we'll go into some discussion afterwards. And I want to hear from everybody as well. Part of opening the heart is sharing, isn't it? So speaking from your heart. And so I'd love to hear some of you speaking from your heart today. And we'll start today with closing the eyes if you like, getting into a comfortable seated position, just here for the beginning meditation. And go ahead and find your seat, just anywhere comfortable, unless you're driving in your car, don't close your eyes. But if you're able to close your eyes, if that feels comfortable, go ahead and do that and just feel rested in your body and alert at the same time. So this nice sense of resting and being alert at the same time. And come into your breath and just notice your breath. Notice your breath coming in and out of your nostrils. Don't try to control it. Just notice it. Like, oh, there's my breath. There's my body. There's my breath. And then what I'll have you do is find the center of your chest and feel that general area of the center of the chest, and visualize that center of the chest as a circle right in the center. And you can give it some color if you like. It would be the green chakra if you want to give it the green chakra color, or another color that comes to your mind for that spot, and then give it that color. And what I want you to do is feeling this color, seeing this color, just go ahead and call one thing in your mind that you're grateful for. We'll start with gratitude. Call one thing in your mind that you're grateful for. Be something very small or very big. And just set your mind on that one thing that you're grateful for a moment. And then as you feel that sense of gratitude, just notice, does the color change? Does the size of this area change? Does the feeling change? And taking that energy of gratitude, noticing the energy of this entire area now, what you're going to do is open up the doorways around the heart. So we'll start this in one direction, and then we'll move it in different directions. So if you could imagine that your heart is a circle, and that the heart area has 3 dimensions, and the heart has a top, a bottom, a left side, a right side, a front, and a back, so that there's all these sides to this circle in the center of your chest. And what you're going to do is you're going to open up the top part of the heart center. So go ahead and open up the top part of the heart center, going upwards. And then after that, you're going to open up the bottom of the heart center. So open up the bottom of the heart center. From there, you're going to open the left of the heart center, and then you'll open the right of the heart center. Next, you're going to open up the front of the heart center, and then you're going to open the back of the heart center. And notice if there's any other corners there, little spots that need to be opened up. So your entire heart center is open and expanding. The top, the bottom, the left side, the right side, the front side, and the back side. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Good. Now ask yourself here in this moment, what are some of the questions that you have about how the heart is related to surrendering on your journey? So how is the heart related to this? What does it have to do with it? And slowly begin to make your way out of having your eyes closed, if your eyes were closed, and come back to the room with me. And welcome. So we're going to talk about this heart center and our connection with it and what it has to do. So go ahead and just type in the chat. So what are some of the questions that come up around what does the heart actually have to do with surrender? Maybe that's obviously the question in and of itself, but there may be another question coming up for you related to the heart. Returning to the true self. So when we talk about the heart, there's so many dimensions to the heart. When we were babies and we lived in our mothers, we got all of our energy from our mother. And from the moment of that first breath, after we left the womb and we came into this space around our mothers, from the moment of that first breath, we began drawing in our own prana by ourselves. Before that, it was happening through the blood of the mother and, the exchange happening through the umbilical cord and stuff like that. So that first moment is us taking our first breath and that prana getting infused into the blood via the heart and the lungs and going to all the areas of the body that need their energy. So from that first moment. And since then, we've all been in charge of controlling our prana, managing our prana, directing our prana. So the practice of pranayama and yoga it's about moving energy. It's not necessarily about just breath. It's about moving energy. Although in the yogic practices, it tends to be more about breathing. So the heart is the connector of us with the prana around us. So then what is prana, right? So if you were here in the activation together with us, we talked a lot about the 5 elements and we talked about the subtle elements of air and space and that we're animated by air. We're animated by that. You can't see it, but it's there. It's what animates us. It's vata. It's what causes movement. And even this word for soul in Sanskrit is atma. And that is where we got the word atom from. And what is an atom, if not one of the basic building blocks of matter and energy? So this heart center is where we get connected with the subtle energies. And it's also how we get connected with one of the ways that we get connected with the space around us, digestion, our skin, other ways as well. And the Sanskrit word for heart is hridaya, which kind of sounds like rhythm, hridaya. And that word in and of itself is made up of 3 characters that each have their own meaning. And the first character means receives. And the second character means gives. And the third character means it just moves that way, just keeps moving that way over and over and over again. So the heart, it gives and it receives, and it just keeps doing it over and over again. So I talk about the heart as the teacher of the body and the teacher of the mind and the teacher and the connector of the soul. But when we think about the heart center, it's not just the heart organ that we think about. It's also this feeling of love, of gratitude. And while that has something to do with the heart, it also has something to do with the lungs and the pleura around the lungs, which is in Ayurveda, what we say is like the seat of kapha or our attachment. And we know that attachment, anybody who's ever been 12 and in love, or who's ever lost something that they loved, we know that this love can be powerful and strengthening, and it can also be debilitating. It can be tiring. It could be focus narrowing, distracting, so us finding that right level of attachment, not being completely unattached, but not being too attached either, finding this middle way. And literally that when we sense these emotions, that there's actual fluid changing in our body and energy changing in our body. Whenever you have a feeling, there's something happening there. There is something happening in your body, even though there may not be like a medical word for it. There's something functionally happening there. So anybody who's ever felt grief, that's that love and that attachment moving out of place. Where does it go? It sinks down, right? Because the body wants to release it. And one of the ways it releases is through the digestive tract or through tears, right? The body wants to release those things that it does not need anymore. So when we feel grief, we don't want to resist it. But the center of the chest can also emotionally get affected by how we feel, the quality of the condition of our tissues. So for example, when our bodies become dry, we often feel less love, less of a sense of attachment. And there are people who have inflammation in this area of their chest. The sternum can have inflammation, costochondritis, where the ribs connect and there can be inflammation. So if you have inflammation in the area that is giving you wisdom, because your feelings give you wisdom and information, if you have any bodily imbalance in that area, it's also going to affect your experience of that emotion, and it can color it and it can tweak it and it can make it more difficult to understand. So it can take a situation that's here right now and make it different because of this residual imbalance that's there from the past. And that's one of the ways that sometimes we fail to see that our lives are really so amazing and so beautiful. And we get stuck in these like weird patterns of the past, is when we have these little imbalances in the body. It does affect the mind. So the heart is considered the root of the prana channel of the body. We already talked about the prana channel, and it pushes the energy to the periphery of the body via action or via a thought that makes us stressed and imagine that we need to run from that polar bear. So our imagination can make the heart work too. And actual action can make it work through that system. And the intelligence of this area is really important. In fact, one of the words for consciousness in Sanskrit is chetana. And chetana is the consciousness of the heart. It's not like the consciousness of the brain. It's the consciousness of the heart, the seat of consciousness. And then there's a whole big question about what is consciousness. And if we assume that consciousness is probably something that we're never going to fully understand because it's so subtle, we could try, but we know that if it has something to do with energy, then it has something to do with prana, then it has something to do with the heart. So we have to pay attention to how we breathe. And when we do yoga, we don't want to just do yoga for, what the teacher says. We pay attention to our bodies at the same time. And that's difficult, right? Because we're here to talk about surrender. And I remember I'm a yoga teacher. I was trained, 10, 11 years ago or something, 12 years ago at this point, actually. Time flies. And I remember writing down, our teacher said, "Hey, tell us why you're here. Tell us, why do you like yoga?" And we had to write on these little pieces of paper all the reasons that we like yoga. And one of my reasons was because I just like to go somewhere and have someone tell me what to do for an hour, so I don't have to think, so I can just be. And I felt, and I realized later after reading that, wow, there's a deep peace in being told what to do. Wow. But then there's also not a deep peace in being told what to do sometimes. So what's the difference between that? Why do we like it when some people tell us what to do, but not others? And learning why that is on an energetic level, there's obviously conditioning from growing up and stuff like that. And we do want to pay attention to how we breathe. And that's why in a yoga class, if you feel you need to breathe differently than the teacher tells you, it's because your body's requiring something different than that teacher's telling you. Your energy is needed for that moment. No one gets to control your energy. No one gets to do that. So the heart is the center of attachment and love and consciousness, and also the Ayurvedic system, immunity. So there's a term called para ojas, which is like the ojas that you were given from birth. And they say it resides in the heart and that it drives your immune response. And it's essentially driving your body's ability to return to homeostasis when it comes in contact with something that's potentially harmful. And there's a whole bunch of things that get invoked when you do come in contact with something harmful. But you don't want your body to react to things that are not harmful too much because your body's out of balance and it thinks that it's harmful from some pre-existing imbalance. Right? So that's hard to piece through. And that's one of the reasons that when you're healing your body, you have to do the mind work too. And they can't be separated. They just can't. They come together. Whether you have a person that allows you to look at both is a different question, right? Because the way we've split up medicine, there's like a person who looks at the body and a person who looks at the mind, and they're different, right? But you're together. That's why I love Ayurveda, because it allows for both of those. And I guess, the two other things I wanted to mention about the heart. This is, a whole year of a course, or a whole discussion. It's years of study just about the heart. It's such a wonderful teacher. But knowing that when people pray, what do? We put our hands to our heart. We put our palms to our heart, like in yoga, Anjali Mudra, or any religion, right? There's hands come together, or in Thailand, the way they greet each other. Sawadika, with the hands on the heart. So why is the heart important for prayer? And if you know the word commitment, the English word commitment comes from the word committere, which is the Latin word. And it means to bring together, to unite, to combine. And if anybody's a yogi here, you know that the word yoga comes from the word yuj, which is to yoke together, to combine, to unite. So yoga and commitment are the same thing. The yoking, the commitment. And sometimes I ask myself as I go through these periods of doubt, because I have a lot of them, like doubt is something I'm always having to punch, get rid of, do something to get rid of it. It's one of my battles that I face in my life. It's like, how do you get rid of doubt? How do you really go 100% all in on something that there's no more doubt anymore? What has to happen? And I'm not saying I have the answer for you, but you have to ask that question. And then it fuses together in the heart. Once you know that you want to go all in on something, then it all merges together and you get that yoking, you get that communion, you get that union all coming together. And oh my gosh, what's happening with prana when that happens? Does the prana then get infused into something, into all of our actions where they want to go? Does it all get connected up when that happens? So this consciousness of the inner and the outer consciousness coming together. And, why I wrote in my book, I wrote a whole chapter on how to engage your heart. I wrote a whole chapter on it. And in fact, a lot of it has to do with building an altar, because you can manipulate the outer to inspire the inner. You can change the inner to change the outer. You can do both. It's a two-way street, but you have to do the work on both ends, the inner and the outer. And that's why I wrote a whole chapter about that in the book. And when you build an altar, you're reminding yourself of your intentions. It's one of the first things I have people do when I work with them, is even if they don't want to have an altar, if they think that's weird, because I was raised Catholic, then I wasn't. I think I would have been very averse to that at certain times of my life, building an altar. Then it's like art on the wall, because whatever you have around you is reinforcing things anyway, visually reminding you of things. So, maybe it's art that inspires you or objects that inspire you. I think I called it inspirational objects in my book. So you're designing the field around you in a way that calls out certain parts of you to connect that inner and the outer, because have you ever just walked in a room and felt really good in that room? Like there's something about the shape of that room or the colors of that room or an object of that room that has an effect on you, or maybe even the opposite, where you walk in a room and it feels, freaky or weird. Or, actually, a very good friend of mine bought a house, and literally the way that it was designed, she couldn't redesign her furniture or whatever within the shape of the house in a way where she could feel comfortable. It was just so off, and she started getting anxiety. And then she had 2 kids and her husband, and she made everybody move because she didn't feel comfortable in that house. And she's like, I'm like, well, I hope it works. I hope when you get this new place, I hope you feel better. And you know what she did? And everybody would think she was crazy. But she was like, I just know that there's something about the shape of this house that doesn't work for me. And I feel this way. And she got a new house. She feels better. That's a very drastic thing to have to go through in your life. But what it tells you is that you do have to listen to how you feel inside. And then your mind's going to give you all kinds of reasons about why something feels a certain way. And if you trust yourself, then you're going to have a good interpretation of why you feel that way. And then the question is, do you trust yourself? And there's a whole process that I think we go through as humans throughout life. It's wisdom that we gain through life experience, and not even sure we get it through the easy things that happen to us in our lives. It's usually the hard things that happen that teach us that wisdom that we've had some response to, that we've had some reaction to. So what keeps your heart beating? And do you have a role, a say in any of this? Because if your heart is beating on its own, can you affect it? Sure, if you breathe differently, you can affect it. If you run versus sit, you can affect it. You have some role in the matter. But also then the question is your mind, your intentions, that kind of consciousness. How does that sit? A lot of people who've had heart attacks, they'll talk about an emotional experience that led to it. So, and oftentimes it's a thought that triggers an emotion. So it's very important for us to understand our thoughts, to determine how much do I actually have a say in what's happening versus how much of this stuff is out of my control. And there's both. There are some things that you control and some things that you don't, and some things that you can design both within you and then within your field around you. But then there are some that we don't. So this question of why is it that we would surrender in certain environments or with certain people and not with others? And knowing what those are so that we can let go, so that we can really trust. I think I'll stop there today because I think that was a lot. And I know that I'm going to be sending this out as a recording too. So speaking to the whole community here, I do want to show, because I know some of you have been considering doing the course that I mentioned. I'm just going to quickly pull that up to talk about what this has to do with it. If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. You want a full human experience when you seek a healthcare provider, and you don't want 15 minutes with someone who can't even try to find out the root cause of things because they're so overwhelmed themselves. You have a body, a mind, a heart, and dare I say it, even emotions. You're not crazy. Everything does affect you, and it's possible to feel better if you have the support you need. Set up an appointment with me to heal naturally. Go to heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.